This is the brief on the legal mechanics of forgery. If you think faking financial documents is just a minor offense, well, think again, because the Philippine Revised Penal Code treats falsifying or even just holding fake currency as a severe crime that totally shatters public trust. First, before we get into the heavy punishments, what acts actually cross the line into illegal territory? You know, forgery isn't just printing fake money in a basement. It's kind of like real-world Photoshop. You're either generating a completely fake document from scratch, or you're tweaking the details on a genuine one, like secretly changing a payee's name on a check. Second, let's look at what is being forged, because the law treats different documents very differently. Forging obligations, payable to bearer, which is basically cash anyone can use, carries massive fines of up to 2 million pesos. Why so harsh? Well, bearer documents act just like cash and rely on absolute public trust. So faking them literally damages the whole financial ecosystem. Instruments payable to order, like personalized checks needing specific endorsements, carry slightly lower fines, up to 1.2 million pesos. And yeah, faking foreign currency is strictly penalized too. Finally, what if you're just the person left holding the bag? You absolutely don't need to be the actual forger to face jail time. Just possessing forged notes is a crime if you know they're fake and actually intend to spend them. But hey, what if someone accidentally hands you fake change? Don't worry. Innocent possession isn't a crime, but trying to hide the money or tearing it up when caught totally proves you knew it was counterfeit. Ultimately, whether you are creating, altering, or knowingly trying to spend a fake financial document, the law treats it as a serious breach of public trust with severe consequences.
This video introduces a diagnostic framework for understanding the Revised Penal Code's Articles 166 through 169 concerning forgery. We will break down the key elements that constitute the crime of forgery. The forgery diagnostic tree identifies 3 dimensions of criminal liability: the act, the object, and the actor. Liability scales based on the mechanical act of deception, the proximity of the instrument to sovereign currency, and the actor's relationship to the counterfeit. Article 169 covers the act of deception, which can involve either creation, giving the appearance of genuine, or alteration. Alteration includes erasing, substituting, counterfeiting, or otherwise changing an existing document. The impossibility paradox, as seen in People v. Casals, is a critical exception. When a forgery is so obviously flawed that it cannot be accepted as genuine, it may constitute an impossible crime rather than standard forgery. The nature of the forged instrument determines the applicable penal provision. Bearer instruments, covered by Article 166, are negotiable by mere delivery. Order instruments, under Article 167, require endorsement and delivery. Article 166 deals with bearer instruments, which are payable to the person possessing them. This includes bonds, treasury notes, and national bank notes. Note that Philippine national bank checks are considered commercial documents, not obligations under Article 166. Article 166 imposes a hierarchy of penalties based on the harm to public credit. Obligations of the Philippines carry the highest penalty, while circulating notes from unauthorized foreign banks carry the lowest. Article 167 targets instruments not payable to bearer or order instruments. These instruments are drawn payable to a specified person or their order, and falsification of these is met with a lower penalty than for bearer instruments. This matrix summarizes the instrument classification. The core distinction is fluidity. Bearer instruments move like cash and pose a broader threat, thus commanding a heavier penalty. When it comes to the actor, a connivance connection is generally required for uttering a fake instrument. The utterer, or passer, must have been in connivance with the maker or forger to be liable for uttering. Article 168 acts as a safety net, covering illegal possession of forged instruments. It captures possessors and independent users when the, quote, connivance line between the utterer and forger is broken. The penalty is 1 degree lower. Liability under Article 168 requires proof that the instrument was forged by someone else and that the offender knew it was forged. Liability is triggered if the instrument is used or possessed with intent to use. Knowledge of the forgery can be proved through conduct. Examples include silence when questioned, destruction of the bill, or deception regarding the bill's existence. This final matrix synthesizes the liability framework. Penalties scale based on the instrument's threat to the economy and the actor's proximity to the origin of the fraud.
Imagine you're just standing at the counter of your local coffee shop.
Right, just a totally normal morning.
Exactly. You order your usual drink, you hand the barista a crisp, 500 peso bill, and you just wait.
And you're probably looking at your phone.
Oh, 100%. The register pops open, the barista counts out your change, and you just shove this handful of crumpled bills into your pocket without even looking twice.
Nobody checks their change.
No one. You walk out the door, take a sip of your coffee, and just go about your day. But in that exact incredibly mundane moment, you might have literally just committed a crime that could put you in prison for years.
It is, it's a terrifying thought when you really sit down and realize how much of our daily existence just relies on blind, absolute trust in small pieces of paper.
It's wild. And that's exactly what we are tearing apart today on this deep dive. We're looking at the legal anatomy of forgery, counterfeiting, and, the illegal possession of financial instruments.
It's a heavy topic.
Very. We are wading deep into a massive stack of legal notes that cover Articles 166 through 169 of the Penal Code.
And I want to emphasize right up front, this isn't just like a playbook for criminal defense attorneys.
Right, or just some historical look at dusty old laws.
Exactly. We are looking at how society fundamentally defines value, how the state aggressively defends its own survival, really.
And how a single, forged signature can completely shatter the illusion that holds our entire economy together.
Because the overarching theme here, for you listening, is the psychology of deception.
The psychology of it, I like that.
Yeah. The law is basically in this constant, desperate foot race against human ingenuity. Every time we invent a new way to secure value,
someone invents a new way to fake it.
Always.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the messy, really chaotic, real-world cases that have tested these laws over the decades.
Like, some of these cases are crazy. We've got people tearing up money in a panic at a store counter.
We have the bizarre legal status of a check written to Batman.
Which is my favorite part of the notes, by the way.
It's so good. And, the economic fallout of World War II.
Right. So let's just start at the foundational level, the absolute ground floor of this whole thing.
Okay, let's do it.
How does a fake actually come into existence? Because when I think of forgery, my brain immediately goes straight to a Hollywood movie.
Oh, like the guy in the dark room.
Yes. I picture this guy in a subterranean basement, sweating over a massive Heidelberg printing press, mixing green ink and churning out sheets of counterfeit money.
Right, the classic movie montage.
But looking at these notes, the legal definition is it's far broader and way more nuanced than just printing fake cash.
It really is. The basement printing press is definitely part of it, sure. But Article 169 of the Penal Code actually categorizes the physical acts of forgery into two totally distinct methods of deception.
Okay, two methods.
Yeah, and understanding the difference between these two is absolutely crucial because they represent two totally different philosophies of, attacking the truth.
Attacking the truth. Okay, what's the first method?
So, method one involves giving to a treasury or banknote or really any instrument payable to bearer or order the appearance of a true, genuine document.
Okay, so just manufacturing the illusion totally from scratch.
Exactly. Creating a lie out of thin air and dressing it up as the truth.
Got it. And the second method?
Method two doesn't create something new at all. Instead, it involves erasing, substituting, counterfeiting, or altering by any means the figures, letters, words, or signs that are already contained within an existing genuine document.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to lock down this distinction. So method one is like painting a fake Mona Lisa completely from scratch.
Right.
Like you buy a blank canvas, you mix the oil paints yourself, and you painstakingly try to replicate Da Vinci's brushstrokes.
So that some billionaire thinks it's the real deal and buys it.
Exactly. But method two is entirely different. It's like, sneaking into the Louvre in the middle of the night, taking out a bottle of solvent, erasing the Mona Lisa's smile, and painting a neon pink mustache on her face.
I absolutely love that visualization. It's perfect.
Right. Because both actions completely destroy the truth of the artifact.
They do, but the mechanics are totally opposed. One brings a completely fake artifact into existence, and the other corrupts a true artifact that was already there.
Okay, but this raises a major, philosophical question for me.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, let's stick with the Mona Lisa for a second.
Yeah.
If the Mona Lisa had already been, say, burned to ashes in a fire,
Okay.
you couldn't really vandalize it anymore. It's already gone.
Right, it doesn't exist.
So applying that to financial documents, let's say you have a document that is already totally useless, like had zero legal or financial value. Does simply writing on a useless piece of paper or, making it look like something else, does that still count as forgery?
Got it.
Because, you can't kill something that's already dead, right?
That is a brilliant question. And it's exactly the kind of dilemma that actual judges have had to wrestle with in court.
Really? So this happens?
Oh, yeah. We actually have a perfect case study for this in the notes. It's a famous case called People versus Galano.
Okay, tell me the story. How exactly do you forge a dead document?
Well, to understand Galano, we kind of need to set the historical stage first.
No.
We are looking at a situation involving a 1 peso bill. But here is the really critical twist, that this specific type of bill had been officially demonetized.
Oh, so it had been formally withdrawn from circulation by the government.
Exactly. It wasn't money anymore.
Meaning it's essentially play money.
Right.
Like it has no more purchasing power than a paper napkin at that point.
Completely worthless in any commercial sense whatsoever. But the offender in this specific case took that completely worthless piece of paper and deliberately wrote the word victory on the back of it.
Just the word victory?
Yeah, just wrote victory.
Why that specific word? I mean, it sounds like a really strange doodle.
It wasn't a doodle at all. It was actually a highly calculated economic play based on the specific era.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so during the post-World War II liberation period in the Philippines, the banking system was just in absolute chaos.
I can imagine.
The country had endured the Japanese occupation, right, which brought its own hyperinflated currency. People often called it Mickey Mouse money because it was just so incredibly worthless.
Right, you needed a wheelbarrow of it just to buy bread.
Exactly. So when the American and Filipino forces began retaking the country, they introduced a brand new, stable currency to try and reestablish the economy.
Okay.
And these new, highly valuable notes were stamped with the word victory.
Okay, I get it now. So victory wasn't just like a patriotic slogan.
Not at all.
It was the ultimate marker of authenticity and value at that specific moment in history.
It was literally the gold standard of the day. So by writing victory on the back of a demonetized, totally worthless bill, the offender was basically executing method 1 of Article 169.
Because they were attempting to give a dead piece of paper the appearance of a true, genuine, and highly valuable circulating victory note.
Exactly. They were trying to resurrect it as a lie.
And I can totally guess the defense's argument here.
Oh, what do you think they said?
They probably stood up in court and said, Your Honor, my client was just doodling on scrap paper. You cannot forge a document that has literally no legal standing.
They argued almost exactly that.
Did they?
Yeah. They claim that because the original canvas was legally dead, no crime was actually committed.
But let me guess, the court didn't buy it.
Not even a little bit. The Supreme Court ruled that this act absolutely constitutes forgery.
Why? If the paper is worthless.
Because the law, in this specific context, does not care that the base material was worthless.
Really?
Yeah, the crime of forgery is not merely about, altering the physical paper itself.
Then what is it about?
The crime is the act of manufacturing an illusion that is intended to deceive the public.
Wow. Manufacturing an illusion.
It is the attempt to inject a lie directly into the bloodstream of the economy. So by giving that worthless bill the appearance of a genuine victory note, the offender attacked the public trust.
That reframes the entire concept for me. The law isn't actually protecting the physical pulp and ink.
No, not really.
It's protecting the psychological trust we have when we interact with currency. Because the moment we start second-guessing our money, society just freezes.
Exactly. The appearance of truth is heavily, heavily regulated. And the lengths that people will go to construct that appearance can be just astonishing.
Oui.
Well, the notes highlight another case that moves away from just like simple handwritten alterations. This one gets into hardcore physical fabrication.
Okay, which case is this?
It's called People versus Orqueza.
What happened in Orqueza?
The offenders here were operating at a much, much higher level of sophistication. They weren't just writing words on old bills with a pen.
Okay.
They were manufacturing entirely fake checks, and the sheer physical effort they put into the illusion was incredible.
Like what did they do?
Well, they actually engraved bold types of dates.
Engraved them?
Yes. They carefully engraved the names of the specific pays. They matched the exact amounts payable in both words and figures to mimic standard professional banking practices.
So they're essentially typesetting a complex financial document from scratch.
It goes even deeper than that.
How?
To truly sell the illusion of a genuine bank check, just ink on paper isn't always enough, right?
So there are usually security features.
Exactly. You need the markers of institutional authority. So they actually caused a fake rubber stamp and a completely fake dry seal to be manufactured specifically for these checks.
Wait, a dry seal?
Yeah.
Like the kind that physically embosses the paper, leaving that raised, bumpy texture?
That exact kind.
That requires serious mechanical effort. You need a metal die, you need a heavy press. They basically built a miniature rogue banking institution in their living room.
They really did. And legally, this falls beautifully under the first method of Article 169.
Because they're building the illusion of authenticity from the ground up.
Yes. Utilizing seals and stamps to mimic the state's or the bank's actual authority. And the dry seal part is particularly fascinating to me.
Why is that?
Because it appeals to our tactile sense of trust.
Oh, the physical touch.
Right. When you run your thumb over a raised seal on a document, your brain subconsciously registers, oh, this is official. This is real.
Yeah, you don't even think about it.
Exactly. The forgers were basically hacking human psychology.
Okay, so Galano and Urquiza show us method 1, right?
Right.
Creating the fake Mona Lisa from scratch.
Correct.
What about method 2? The mustache on the real painting. You know, the act of erasing, substituting, or altering an existing document.
For that, we look at a very different case called U.S. versus Toledo.
Toledo.
Yeah. And this case is just so elegant because it demonstrates how a tiny, almost imperceptible alteration can fundamentally shatter the legal reality of an entire document.
Okay, set the scene.
In Toledo, we have a check, a completely real, 100% valid, fully funded check.
So the canvas is absolutely genuine.
The canvas is perfect. The
Right.
signature of the person who wrote the check is real. The amount in the bank is real.
Okay.
But the offender simply takes a pen and writes a name on the back of the check.
Wait, just on the back.
Just on the back.
An endorsement.
An endorsement, exactly. When a check is drawn to order, say, it says, pay to the order of John Doe. John Doe has to sign the back to negotiate it, right?
Right. That signature is basically the key that unlocks the funds.
Precisely. So the offender in Toledo forged that signature on the back, making it look exactly as if the legitimate payee had endorsed the check over to them.
Wow. So the check itself, the front of it, the bank routing numbers, the account balance, all of that is totally untouched.
Completely uncorrupted.
But by just altering the back, by adding just a few letters forming a name, they completely hijack the financial plumbing of the whole transaction.
Yep. They divert the entire flow of the money from its intended destination straight into their own pocket.
That is, I mean, it's terrifyingly simple.
It is. They substituted a lie for the truth. They altered the signs and letters on the document to illegally reroute its value.
And under Article 169, that alteration is treated as forgery.
Yes, with all the weight and penalty of printing a fake bill completely from scratch.
Really? Even though they just wrote a name?
Because the end result is exactly the same. The truth of the financial system has been breached.
Man. Okay, so we've established the physical and psychological mechanics. We know exactly how the lie is constructed.
Right.
But the penal code obviously doesn't treat all lies equally, right?
Definitely does not.
Because there's a massive, massive difference between, say, faking a check to pay your landlord and faking a giant stack of national currency.
And now we enter the realm of state security, the heavy artillery.
The heavy hitters. This brings us to Article 166, which covers the forging of bearer instruments and state currency.
Yes.
And I have to say, when I first read through this section of the notes, my jaw literally dropped at the sheer scale of the penalties.
They are intense.
There is a very strict, highly specific hierarchy of punishment here, and it is just brutal.
Article 166 categorizes the forging of treasury notes, banknotes, or other documents payable to bearer into 4 distinct tiers.
4 tiers.
Yeah, and you are totally right. The penalties don't just scale based on the amount of money forged.
What do they scale on?
They scale based on exactly whose authority you are mocking.
Okay, let's walk through this hierarchy for the listener, because they need to hear this. If I'm a forger, what is the absolute worst case scenario? What is tier 1?
Tier 1 is the apex offense. This applies if the document forged, counterfeited, or altered is an obligation or security of the Philippines.
So the nation's own paper.
Exactly. And the penalty here is reclusion temporal in its minimum period.
Okay, I want to pause and digest that for a second. Reclusion temporal. I mean, in the abstract language of the law, that sounds almost, I don't know, clinical.
It does sound a bit sterile.
But in human terms, what does that actually mean for the person standing in front of the judge?
In human terms, it means your life as you currently know it is essentially over.
Wow.
Reclusion temporal generally translates to imprisonment ranging from 12 years and 1 day all the way up to 20 years.
2 decades.
Yeah. And even if the judge shows mercy and gives you the minimum period, you are still looking at over a decade locked in a cell.
Over a decade for faking a piece of paper.
But the state doesn't stop at just taking your time. It also takes your wealth. Tier 1 comes with a fine of up to 2 million pesos.
2 million pesos for forging a local bill.
Yes.
That is an earth-shattering consequence. I mean, they really throw the book at you.
It is entirely designed to be a supreme, undeniable deterrent.
Okay, so that's tier 1. Now, as we step down the hierarchy, do the penalties soften?
They soften slightly, but they remain extremely severe. Tier 2 applies if the falsified document is a circulating note issued by any banking association duly authorized by law to issue the same.
Okay, so we're talking about authorized private or commercial banks that have a specific charter to issue circulating notes.
Exactly. The penalty here drops to prison mayor in its maximum period.
And how long is that?
That is roughly 10 to 12 years. And it comes alongside a fine not to exceed 1 million pesos.
So still devastating. Half the fine, but you're still doing a decade in prison.
Right. Then we hit Tier 3.
What's Tier 3?
This is where we cross international borders. Tier 3 applies if the falsified document was issued by a foreign government.
Oh, okay. So imagine someone counterfeiting United States Treasury notes or maybe British government bonds while sitting in Manila.
Exactly that. The penalty here is prison mayor in its medium period, which is around 8 to 10 years, and a fine up to 1 million pesos.
Okay. And the bottom tier?
Tier 4 is for forging a circulating note or bill issued by a foreign bank that is duly authorized to issue them.
Foreign bank, not foreign government.
Right. And the penalty is prison mayor in its minimum period, roughly 6 to 8 years, and a fine up to 400,000 pesos.
Okay, I have to challenge the logic here, because looking at this hierarchy, the state takes an incredibly, almost disproportionate stance.
How so?
Well, if I forge a Philippine obligation, I get hit with a 2 million peso fine and up to 2 decades in a cell.
Correct.
But if I forge a note from a foreign bank, the fine is slashed all the way down to 400,000 pesos, and the jail time is literally cut in half.
Yeah, it's a big drop.
Why does the state take it so much more personally when his own obligations are forged? Like, is this just raw nationalism?
Yeah.
You know, protect our stuff, but if you mess with another country's economy, we don't care quite as much.
It definitely looks like pure nationalism on the surface, I'll give you that, but it's actually rooted in deep, deep macroeconomic survival.
Survival.
Yeah. To really understand this, we have to talk about what a national currency actually is in the modern world.
Okay, let's do it.
We operate on fiat currency, right?
Right.
The money in your wallet is not backed by gold sitting in a vault somewhere. It is not backed by silver. It is inherently completely worthless paper or polymer.
It only has value because we all just collectively agree to hallucinate that it has value.
It is a shared hallucination, exactly. But it is a hallucination that is backed by the threat of state violence and the credit of the issuing government.
Right.
The Philippine peso is valuable because the Philippine government demands that taxes be paid in pesos, and it legally enforces the acceptance of pesos for settling debts.
If you owe me a debt and I offer you pesos, you legally have to take them.
Precisely. So when you forge an obligation or security of the Philippines, you are not committing simple theft.
What are you committing?
You are actively undermining the foundational trust of the entire local economy.
Oh, wow. You're basically hacking the matrix.
You are. Imagine a scenario where a massive influx of flawless counterfeit 1,000 peso bills just floods Manila.
Complete chaos.
Total chaos. Vendors stop accepting 1,000 peso bills entirely because they can't tell what's real.
Right.
Citizens lose faith in the paper. They start demanding foreign currency or they revert to barter.
The economy stops.
Commerce grinds to a complete halt. Inflation spirals out of control because the money supply is artificially inflated by the fakes.
That makes the 2 million peso fine make total absolute sense.
Exactly. The state punishes Tier 1 so severely because forging local currency is essentially an economic act of treason.
Treason. That's a strong word, but it fits.
It is a direct existential threat to the sovereignty and stability of the nation. Forging a foreign banknote is bad, obviously, but it doesn't threaten the immediate survival of the Philippine economy.
You are trying to poison the town's primary well. The law just has to be ruthless.
It has no choice, and the notes are very, very granular about what exactly constitutes this Tier 1 obligation or security of the Philippines.
Right, because it's not just the physical cash in your pocket.
No, the definition is incredibly broad. It includes government bonds, certificates of indebtedness, national banknotes. It explicitly names money bills issued by the central bank, so your standard 5, 10, and 20 peso bills.
Okay.
But it also sweeps up coupons, treasury notes, fractional notes, certificates of deposit, bills, checks, or drafts for money drawn by authorized officers of the Philippines.
So essentially, any single piece of paper carrying the sovereign promise of the state to pay out value.
Yes, with one really fascinating exception.
Oh, I love an exception.
The law is never as clean as we want it to be, is it?
Never.
Not all checks issued by a massive government-linked entity fall under the apocalyptic penalties of Article 166.
Really? Where is the loophole? What kind of state check actually escapes Tier 1?
We find the answer in a really interesting Supreme Court case, Furia versus Court of Appeals.
Furia. Okay, what happened?
This case established that Philippine National Bank, or PNB, checks are considered commercial documents, not obligations or securities of the Philippines under the strict definition of Article 166.
Wait, but PNB is historically a massive state-backed institution. Why wouldn't its checks be treated with the exact same reverence as, say, central banknotes?
Because of the actual function of the paper. Yeah, the law looks at the primary purpose of the document. A banknote from the central bank is legal tender, right? It is designed to circulate freely forever. It is the blood in the economic veins.
Right, I give it to you, you give it to the grocer gives it to the farmer.
Exactly. But a check from PNB is a commercial instrument. It is used in the regular course of business banking to settle specific transactions between specific parties.
Oh, I see. It's a localized tool, not the general free-flowing currency.
Exactly. It doesn't have endless velocity. And the Furia case provides a great historical narrative for this. The defendant in this case actually falsified a U.S. depository war damage check in order to cash it.
Let's linger on that for a second. War damage checks.
Yeah.
We're back in the post-WWII era again, dealing with the fallout of the destruction of Manila and the wider country. The U.S. was issuing these checks as reparations or payouts to help rebuild, right?
Right. The country was just flooded with these specific instruments, and people were desperate. And wherever there is a massive influx of government money,
a massive fraud follows right behind it.
Always. Someone falsified one of these war damage checks. Now, a layman reading the penal code might think, aha, forging a foreign government document that's Tier 3 of Article 166 hit him with the 1 million peso fine.
Honestly, that would be my exact assumption. It has a government seal on it.
Right. But the courts played three-dimensional chess here. The Supreme Court ruled that cashing this falsified check was not prosecuted under Article 166.
Then what did they charge him with?
Instead, the prosecution went after him for a complex crime, specifically estafa through the falsification of an official or commercial document, which actually falls under Articles 315 and 172.
Okay, estafa being the legal term for fraud, swindling, or deceit. But what exactly is a complex crime in this context?
So a complex crime occurs when a single act constitutes two or more grave or less grave felonies, or when one offense is a necessary means for committing the other.
So here, the offender couldn't commit the estafa, the actual swindling of the money, without first committing the falsification of the commercial document.
You nailed it. So the prosecutor is looking at the actual intent of the offender. The intent wasn't to undermine the U.S. Treasury's global standing or collapse the economy.
Right, they didn't care about the U.S. Treasury.
No, the intent was to swindle a specific payout from a specific bank.
So the nuance is critical. Article 166 is a shield meant to protect currency and bearer instruments that flow freely.
Exactly. Falsifying a single check to execute a localized, specific fraud is a targeted crime. It requires a completely different legal tool, even if the document happens to have a government seal stamped on it.
That makes a lot of sense. And that brings us to a phrase that acts as, really, the linchpin for this entire section of the law.
Which phrase?
Payable to bearer.
Ah, yes.
Article 166 explicitly targets documents payable to bearer. To fully grasp why the law is so utterly terrified of these instruments, we really need to unpack what that actually means in the real world.
We do, because the concept of a bearer instrument is honestly one of the most powerful and dangerous ideas in all of finance.
Okay, define it for me.
Under Section 9 of the Negotiable Instruments Law, an instrument is payable to bearer when it is negotiated by mere delivery.
Meaning, literally, whoever physically holds it owns it.
Yes.
If I hand it to you, the value transfers instantly. No signature required, no ID check, no waiting for a bank clearing process.
Exactly. Cash is the ultimate bearer instrument.
It is pure, frictionless commerce.
It is. But the legal criteria for what turns a piece of paper into a bearer instrument go far, far beyond just standard cash.
Really? Like what else?
Well, the Negotiable Instruments Law outlines 5 specific conditions, and honestly, some of them are wonderfully absurd.
I'm so ready for the absurdity. What makes a document payable to bearer?
The first 2 are pretty straightforward.
No.
1, if the document is explicitly expressed to be payable to bearer.
Like it actually says the word bearer on it.
Right. And 2, if it's payable to a specific person or to bearer. For example, a check that literally says, pay to John Doe or bear.
Okay, that makes total sense. John can cash it himself, or John can just hand it to his mechanic to pay for repairs, and the mechanic can cash it.
Exactly. It offers flexibility. But the third condition is where the law enters the realm of pure fiction.
I love when the law gets weird.
An instrument is legally payable to bearer if it is payable to the order of a fictitious or non-existent person.
Wait, what?
Provided that the person making the check actually knew the payee was fictitious.
Okay, let me try to wrap my head around that. If I write a check and I make it payable to, let's say, Batman,
Okay.
and I obviously know Batman does not exist in real life,
Exactly, no.
does the law step in and magically transform that check into a bearer instrument?
Yes. The law doesn't care about Batman. The law cares about intent and negotiability.
Wow.
By writing a check to a fiction, you have demonstrated that you do not intend for a specific, identifiable human being to be the sole party capable of cashing it.
Right, because Batman can't show ID at the teller window.
Exactly. Therefore, the law interprets your action as creating an instrument meant to circulate freely. Anyone holding the Batman check can legally negotiate it just by physical delivery.
That is wild. I could literally write, pay to the order of the Tooth Fairy, and hand it to my landlord, and it functions as cash.
Legally, yes. Though your landlord's bank might ask some very serious questions when he tries to deposit it.
I'm sure they would.
The fourth condition operates on a very similar logic. It's a bearer instrument if the name of the payee does not purport to be the name of any person.
Give me an example, like writing a check out to cash or payroll.
Precisely. Cash cannot endorse a check. Payroll is a concept, not a person. Therefore, whoever physically holds the check endorsed to cash is the bearer.
Makes sense. And the final condition.
The fifth condition occurs when the only or last endorsement on a document is an endorsement in blank.
An endorsement in blank. How does that actually work in practice?
Okay, let's say you receive a check made out specifically to your name. It is an order instrument. To cash it, you flip it over and sign the back.
All right, standard procedure.
But instead of writing pay to Jane Smith and then signing your name, which would transfer it specifically to Jane, you just scribble your signature and nothing else. You have endorsed it in blank.
So I've unlocked the value, but I haven't told the money where to go next.
Which means it can go anywhere. If you endorse that check in blank and accidentally drop it on the sidewalk outside the bank,
Oh, no.
the person who picks it up is now the legal bearer.
You can just walk right in and cash it.
They can take it to the bank and cash it, no questions asked. By signing in blank, you transformed a restricted order instrument into a freely circulating bearer instrument.
This just demonstrates how incredibly fluid financial documents really are. A piece of paper can mutate from a highly restricted contract into pure, untraceable cash based on a single scribble on the back.
It's terrifying if you aren't careful.
And because bearer instruments are so fluid and so immensely dangerous to the economy if forged, the law obviously casts a very wide net to catch anyone involved in the counterfeit trade.
Very wide.
Article 166 doesn't just punish the guy in the basement printing the money. It also punishes importing and uttering.
Right. It attacks the entire supply chain of the cartel.
The whole operation.
Exactly. Forging is the manufacturing phase. Importing is the smuggling phase. But there's a very specific legal parameter here regarding importing.
That's a parameter.
To be charged with importing under this article, the note must have actually been forged in a foreign country and then brought in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you cannot forge a stack of pesos in a basement in Manila, smuggle them onto a boat to Hong Kong, bring them back a week later, and get charged with importing.
So you're just a domestic forger taking your fakes on a little vacation.
Pretty much. The law differentiates.
Okay, what about uttering? That word always sounds so archaic to me. Like we usually use it to mean speaking, like uttering a sound.
Right. It sounds a bit Shakespearean.
Yeah.
But in the context of criminal law, uttering means offering, passing, or declaring a forged document as genuine.
So it's the act of trying to inject the fake into the economy, handing the fake 500 peso bill to the barista in our coffee shop example that is uttering.
Exactly. But here is where the law introduces a massive, massive safeguard to protect innocent people.
I was wondering about that.
To be punished for uttering or importing under the draconian penalties of Article 166, the decades in prison, there must be connivance.
Connivance. So conspiracy, working together with the mastermind.
Right. The notes highlight the case of People versus Valencia to really anchor this point.
What did the court say in Valencia?
The court ruled that Article 166 is not violated by an utterer in the absence of connivance.
Make that concrete for me.
Think about the structure of a counterfeit ring. You have the mastermind, the printer, the smugglers, and then you have the really low-level street runners.
The mules. The guy who was just handed a stack of fake 20s and told to go buy cigarettes at 50 different bodegas to get clean change.
Exactly. If that street runner is completely disconnected from the manufacturing process, if he didn't conspire with the forger, if he doesn't even know who printed the money or where it came from, he cannot be prosecuted under Article 166.
Really? He gets off?
Oh, he doesn't get off. He will absolutely be prosecuted, but not under the statute that carries a 2 million peso fine and 20 years in prison.
The state reserves the apocalyptic penalties for the architects of the deception and their direct co-conspirators.
The law recognizes the difference between the generals of the cartel and the foot soldiers.
It has to, or the justice system would just completely collapse under disproportionate sentencing.
Exactly.
So Article 166 and its terrifying penalties are reserved for bearer instruments, money and documents that flow like water.
Right.
But what if the document you forge does not flow like water? What if the document is highly restricted and assigned to a specific person?
This shifts the legal math entirely. This moves us straight into the territory of Article 167, order instruments.
Order instruments. Yeah. And the very first thing that jumps off the page in the notes when we hit Article 167 is the massive plunge in the penalty.
It's a huge drop.
We just spent 20 minutes talking about reclusion temporal, decades in prison, and 2 million peso fines. But under Article 167, the penalty plummets to prison correctional in its median and maximum periods, alongside a fine not exceeding 1.2 million pesos.
Right. And prison correctional translates roughly to imprisonment of just 2.5 to 6 years.
2.5 to 6 years, compared to 20.
It
is a staggering reduction in severity.
It really is.
Let me test an analogy here to try and explain this massive drop.
Okay, let's hear it.
If forging bearer instruments under Article 166 is like poisoning the town's water supply because it hits the general economy and anyone could become a victim, then forging an order instrument under Article 167 is like poisoning one specific person's cup of coffee.
Oh, I like that.
Right. An order instrument, by definition, is drawn payable to a specified person. It has to be negotiated by endorsement and delivery. So why does the state view the poisoned coffee as so much less dangerous than the poisoned well?
Your analogy is actually perfect because it all comes down to the radius of the blast zone.
The blast zone.
Yeah. It echoes the exact philosophy we discussed earlier with fiat currency. Bearer instruments like cash rely on absolute frictionless velocity.
Velocity.
Right. When I hand you a 1,000 peso bill, you don't ask for my driver's license. You don't ask me to sign a ledger.
No, I just take it.
You accept it on blind faith. If that faith is broken, the velocity stops and the economy stops.
The velocity of money requires absolute trust.
But an order instrument, say, a check made out specifically to Jane Smith, has intentional, heavy friction built directly into its DNA.
The friction.
Yeah. To negotiate that check, Jane Smith has to physically endorse it. The bank teller has to actually look at her ID. The check has to go through a clearinghouse where signatures are verified against account records.
So there is a paper trail, a digital trail, and multiple layers of human oversight.
Exactly. The system is intentionally designed to slow the transaction down in order to verify it.
So because of that built-in friction, the potential for a forged order instrument to rapidly infect the broader economy is basically negligible.
You are not defrauding the concept of money itself. You are defrauding one specific bank account or one specific individual.
The blast zone is contained.
Contained entirely. Therefore, the penalty is drastically reduced to reflect the much narrower scope of the damage.
That is a highly logical, really elegant way to structure the law. The punishment actually fits the macroeconomic risk.
It does. And the notes also mention that Article 167 is a bit of a catch-all, too.
Oh, also.
Because it includes foreign government or bank documents of credit, simply because the text of the law deliberately omits specifying the issuing country.
So it acts as a broad net for targeted credit documents globally.
Yes. But I have to warn you, while the philosophy behind Article 167 is very clean and logical,
There's a but coming.
there is a massive but. The actual application in the courtroom is incredibly frustratingly messy.
Of course it is.
If you thought the penal code was a flawless algorithm, the case law surrounding U.S. Treasury warrants will quickly disabuse you of that notion.
Okay, let's talk about the muddy waters. What exactly is a U.S. Treasury warrant, and why did it break the legal system?
Think of a U.S. Treasury warrant basically as a government-issued check. They were heavily utilized in the mid-20th century.
Okay.
Now, you have courts looking at people who falsified these specific warrants, and the judges have to decide which article of the penal code applies.
Well, based on what we just learned, if the warrant is made out to a specific person, meaning it's not payable to bearer, it should fall cleanly into Article 167. Poisoned coffee, not poisoned well.
That is the incredibly logical assumption based on a plain reading of the text, but the law is always subject to human interpretation.
And humans mess things up.
Constantly. Let's look at the case of People versus Lotero. The court in Lotero ruled that falsifying a U.S. Treasury warrant that is not payable to bearer does not violate Article 167.
Wait, what?
Instead, they ruled it violates Article 172, which deals with falsification by private individuals.
But why? If it's an instrument of credit not payable to bearer, why on earth wouldn't it be covered by 167? That's literally what the article is for.
The court made a highly technical distinction regarding the specific nature of the document and the status of the offender. But honestly, the frustration deepens.
It gets worse.
Let's look at another case from the notes. People versus Esteban.
Okay.
In Esteban, the prosecution was going after someone for passing off forged U.S. Treasury warrants.
So the exact same type of document as Lotero.
The exact same type of document. But in Esteban, the prosecution charged the offender, and the court processed the case under Article 166.
Article 166, the heavy hitter town well poisoning article, reserved for bearer instruments. How is that even possible? How does the exact same category of financial document bounce between Article 172, Article 167, and Article 166, depending on which judge is sitting on the bench? That sounds like a complete systemic failure.
It highlights the chaotic, often frustrating reality of jurisprudence. Courts have to weigh the specific, microscopic facts of each individual case.
I guess.
They have to look at the exact wording printed on the warrants in those specific years, which might have changed slightly. They have to consider the specific charges the prosecutor decided to file.
This is a bit of a crapshoot.
It is a powerful reminder that the law is not a math equation. It is a deeply human enterprise, driven by arguments over definitions, intent, and precedent.
Speaking of arguments over definitions, I want to revisit a concept from the previous section that came up again.
Okay, which one?
We talked about connivance, the requirement that an utterer must conspire with the forger to be hit with the big penalties.
Right, the street runner versus the cartel boss.
Right. Well, Article 167 also requires connivance. The text says you must forge, import, or utter in connivance with the forgers or importers.
It does say that, yeah.
And according to the notes, defense attorneys have tried to use that exact wording to create an incredibly ingenious loophole.
I love legal loopholes. They are so creative.
How do they try to break it?
We find the answer by actually revisiting the Orcasa case. Remember the people who built the fake rubber stamps and dry seals?
Oh, yeah, the Living Room Bank.
The notes drop a beautiful logical bomb here regarding connivance.
Let's hear it.
A defense attorney looking at the strict text of the law could argue, Your Honor, my client was caught uttering this fake check. However, the law clearly states he must connive with the forger to be guilty.
Okay.
But my client is a lone wolf. He printed the check entirely by himself, and he passed it entirely by himself. He never conspired with anyone. Therefore, he cannot possibly be guilty of uttering under this article.
Oh my God. He is using his own isolation as a defense against conspiracy.
Exactly. He is demanding the court prove he held a secret meeting with himself in a mirror to conspire.
That is hilarious. But did it work?
No, the Supreme Court stepped in and shut that down immediately. The ruling was simple and devastating. Connivance is not required if the utterer is actually the forger themselves.
It's the ultimate application of common sense. If you baked the poison cake and you serve the poison cake, you don't get off the hook just because you didn't hire a waiter.
Perfectly said. The law looks at the totality of the act. The forgery encompasses the uttering.
Okay, up to this point, we have really been living in the world of the masterminds.
We have.
The syndicates printing money in basements, the targeted fraudsters building fake dry seals, the lone wolves passing fake checks.
The career criminals.
But what about the rest of us? What happens if I go to the ATM, withdraw some cash, and unknowingly receive a forged bill?
It happens.
And then later, I try to buy groceries, and the cashier realizes it's fake and calls the police. Am I going to prison?
This brings us to the most terrifying, relatable, and behaviorally complex part of the entire penal code.
Here we go.
Article 168, illegal possession and use of false treasury or banknotes.
The everyman's crime, holding the bag.
Article 168 is designed specifically to catch the people holding the fake paper at the very end of the line.
And what's the penalty for holding the bag?
The penalty for this is automatically set 1 degree lower than the penalties prescribed for the actual forgers in Articles 166 and 167.
Okay, so depending on the tier, we are still potentially talking about years in a state penitentiary.
Yes, it is definitely not a slap on the wrist.
But wait, because the risk of prosecuting a totally innocent person is so incredibly high here.
It is astronomically high.
The state has to have some safeguard.
They do. They have to clear 3 massive, strict hurdles to secure a conviction. They must definitively prove 3 distinct elements.
Okay, I am taking mental notes for the next time I get sketchy change at a toll booth. What is the first hurdle?
First, the state must definitively prove that the treasury note, banknote, or instrument is forged or falsified by a person other than the offender.
So establishing that it's actually fake.
Right. As established in the case of People versus Baracchia, you cannot be charged with possessing a fake bill if the bill turns out to be entirely genuine.
That seems pretty obvious. No crime if there's no fake. And if I made it myself, well, I'm the forger, not just the possessor.
Exactly. What is the second hurdle?
The second element is where the battle is truly fought in court.
Okay.
The state must prove that the offender actually knew that the instrument was forged or falsified.
Okay. Knowledge.
The notes reference U.S. versus De Leon, which established a vital foundational defense. A complete lack of awareness of the counterfeit character of the note completely negates guilt.
If you truly didn't know, you are innocent.
Okay, I have a massive pushback on this. This is the part that terrifies me.
Die.
How on earth does a prosecutor or a judge prove what is happening inside the dark theater of my mind?
That's the million-dollar question.
How do they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I knew the 20 peso bill in my pocket was fake? I don't carry a UV light on my keychain. I don't feel for the intaglio printing on every bill. I just shove it in my wallet.
Most people do.
The state cannot read minds.
You have just hit on the central crisis of all criminal law. The state cannot read minds, so it is forced to become a student of behavioral science.
Behavioral science?
Yes. To prove knowledge, the courts examine human conduct. They dissect exactly how you behaved before, during, and after you were caught with the fake money.
Oh, wow.
The case law here is literally a masterclass in human psychology and panic. Let's look at how the courts reverse engineer the truth from a person's physical actions.
Please paint the picture for me. How do my actions prove my guilt?
Let's start with the case of People versus Copau.
Copau.
In this scenario, the court ruled that a failure to satisfactorily explain how you came into possession of a forged bank bill can indicate knowledge of its falsity.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Doesn't that directly violate my constitutional right to remain silent?
It touches on it, yes.
Because if a police officer stops me, finds a fake bill, and asks where I got it, my lawyer would tell me to shut my mouth and ask for counsel. Can the court actually use my silence as proof of guilt?
It's a great question, and the notes explicitly flag this exact tension. They advise the reader to carefully consider the accused's right against self-incrimination.
Because that's a fundamental right.
Right. In a modern constitutional context, simply invoking your right to remain silent should not automatically infer guilt. However, Copau deals with the absurdity of the explanation when one is actually given.
Oh, so it's not about silence, it's about lying.
Exactly. If the police find a briefcase containing 500 forged bills in your trunk, and your explanation is, oh, I found it at the end of a rainbow, or you refuse to provide any logical business context for having that massive volume of cash, the court can infer that your lack of a rational explanation points to guilty knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense. The volume and the context matter. It's not just about one bad bill from the coffee shop.
Exactly. Now let's look at a much more visceral behavioral tell, the panic reaction.
The panic reaction, I do this when I lose my keys.
We see this brilliantly illustrated in the case of People versus Quindo.
What did Quentin do?
So an individual was attempting to pass off a forged 20 peso bill to complete a transaction at a store.
Okay.
The person receiving the bill, the cashier, was sharp. They grew suspicious. They didn't just accept it blindly. They started examining it really closely.
Holding it up to the light.
Exactly. Holding it up to the light, rubbing the paper to feel the texture, checking the watermark.
Doing the whole amateur forensics routine right there at the counter.
Right. And how did the owner of the bill react to this intense scrutiny?
He panicked.
He panicked hard. He reached across the counter, snatched the bill right out of the cashier's hands, and tore it to pieces right there on the spot.
He destroyed the evidence in broad daylight.
He did. Think about the psychology of innocence versus guilt in that exact moment.
Right. If I hand you a bill and you look at it and say, hey, I think this is counterfeit, an innocent person is going to be shocked and probably angry.
They'll say, are you serious? Let me see that. The ATM literally just gave me that bill.
Exactly. They want to examine it themselves.
But a guilty person knows the game is up. Their primary animal instinct is self-preservation through destruction.
Wow.
The court in Quentin ruled that snatching the bill and tearing it to pieces was absolute, undeniable proof of guilty knowledge.
It's the ultimate poker tell. Your own body language convicts you.
It really is. And if Quentin was the panic reaction, our next case, People versus McConney, is the cover-up.
A cover-up.
This is honestly a tragicomedy of errors on how not to handle a police search.
I am so ready.
So the police arrived to execute a search on the accused property.
Okay.
Initially, the accused completely denies having any counterfeit bills on the premises. Total, flat denial.
Standard operating procedure for a criminal.
But the police start searching anyway, and the accused watches them, and he realizes they're getting very, very close to his hidden stash of fake money.
The walls are closing in.
So, in a desperate, wild attempt to misdirect the officers, he suddenly confesses to a completely different crime.
Wait, what?
He says, okay, look, I don't have fake money, but I do have an unlicensed revolver.
Are you kidding me? He offered up a gun charge to save himself from a counterfeit charge.
Yes, he voluntarily surrendered the illegal firearm, hoping the police would say, great, we got a gun bust, high fives all around, let's pack it up and go home.
That is insane logic.
But the police are thorough, they take the gun, and they just keep searching.
Oh, no.
And eventually, of course, they find the package of counterfeit bills.
That is just disastrous.
In court, he likely tried to claim he didn't know the bills were fake. But the judge looked at his behavior. The initial lie, followed by the calculated, desperate sacrifice of an illegal weapon just to derail the search. The court ruled that this elaborate misdirection overwhelmingly proved he knew exactly what was in that package.
Because innocent people do not trade felonies to hide scrap paper.
Exactly.
These cases really highlight that the courtroom is just as much about human drama and psychology as it is about statutory text.
It's a stage.
Okay, so the state has cleared hurdle 1. The bill is definitely fake. They cleared hurdle 2. Your shady, panicky behavior proves you knew it was fake.
Yep.
What is the third and final hurdle?
The third element is the action phase. To be convicted under Article 168, the offender must perform one of 2 acts.
Okay.
They must either actually use the forged instrument or they must possess it with the active intent to use it.
Wait, let's clarify that. Mere possession, even if you know 100% that it's fake, is not enough to put you in prison.
Correct.
Really?
The law is very specific here, and the case of People versus Digero deeply analyzed this exact boundary between intent to possess and intent to use.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say you realize a bill is fake, and you think, hey, this is kind of cool, actually. So you take it home, you frame it, and you hang it on your office wall as a conversation piece.
Okay.
You possess it, and you know it's fake, but you have absolutely no intent to inject it back into the economy. Under Article 168, you have not committed a crime.
Because the law requires the intent to cause damage to another person or the financial system.
Exactly. Mere possession, completely uncoupled from the intent to use it to the damage of another, is not penalized.
Wow, I didn't know that.
However, and this is a massive caveat that shifts the legal landscape considerably.
Well, of course there is.
If you are caught with a significant quantity of fake bills, the burden of proof violently shifts.
How so?
In cases like People versus De La Roca and People versus Sane, the courts established that if you are caught holding a large stack of counterfeit notes, the state automatically presumes you intend to use them.
They just assume guilt.
The burden of explaining your innocent possession falls entirely on you. The judge essentially looks at you and says, you have 50 fake 1,000 peso bills in your glove compartment. We presume you are going to spend them. Convince us otherwise.
I mean, that makes sense. You don't accidentally carry 50 fake bills for your scrapbooking project.
Exactly.
But what about a scenario where you have the intent, but you change your mind?
Oh, repentance.
Yeah. Let's say I get a fake bill. I am furious that I got scammed. I decide I'm going to pass it off to the cashier at the grocery store to recoup my loss.
Okay, intent is formed.
I walk into the store. I have the fake bill in my sweaty hand. I have the clear intent. But as I stand in line, my conscience kicks in.
The angel on your shoulder.
Right. I realize it's wrong to make this poor cashier suffer for my bad luck.
Yeah.
So I step out of line, walk outside, and throw the fake bill straight down a storm drain.
Okay.
Did I commit a crime the moment I stood in that line with the intent in my heart?
You have just perfectly, flawlessly recreated the facts of a beautiful case. People versus Padilla.
No way. What happened to Padilla? Did they lock him up?
In Padilla, the accused possessed a forged note with the clear, undeniable intention to use it, but before actually executing that intention, he threw the note away.
Just like the storm drain.
Exactly. The court had to decide if the fleeting presence of intent was enough to convict him.
And what did they say?
Their ruling is honestly one of the most poetic lines in the entire penal code.
What is it?
They acquitted him, stating simply, the law does not close the door of repentance.
Oh, wow. The law does not close the door of repentance. That is profound.
Isn't it?
It's a reminder that the justice system isn't just like a bear trap waiting to snap shut on you. It's actually a mechanism designed to encourage good behavior.
Exactly. It recognizes the moral victory of self-correction. Criminal law fundamentally seeks to prevent harm. If the offender prevents the harm themselves, the law has achieved its goal without needing to punish.
That is surprisingly uplifting for a deep dive into the penal code.
I know, right?
But I want to wrap up our journey through the case law with one final anomaly from the notes.
Ah, the anomaly.
Yeah, we have talked about serious, life-ruining crimes today. But there is one case here that just feels like a dark comedy. It's listed as the impossible crime anomaly.
Oh, People versus Casals. This is a fascinating theoretical knot that lawyers absolutely love to argue about over drinks.
Set the scene for us. What made this crime so impossible?
In the Casals case, the accused individuals attempted to possess and use false treasury notes.
Okay, standard forgery.
They had the intent, they performed the physical acts of forgery, they tried to pass them off, but there was a catastrophic, hilarious flaw in their execution.
What did they do?
The printed matter on the treasury notes was inversely reproduced on a coupon bond.
Inversely reproduced. Wait, you mean they printed the money backwards, like a mirror image?
Exactly backwards.
Like you hold it up and the text is literally reversed.
Yes. It was a completely botched, profoundly amateur job.
How do you even mess up that badly?
Who knows? But the court looked at these physically ridiculous notes and concluded that the deception was so poorly executed that it was physically inherently impossible for anyone to ever accept them as genuine money.
I mean, a child wouldn't accept.
Right, because the fake was so completely devoid of the appearance of truth, the court classified it as an impossible crime.
It's like trying to murder someone by stabbing a voodoo doll.
That is a great comparison.
You have the malicious intent, you are doing the physical act of stabbing, but the mechanism is so fundamentally flawed it cannot possibly achieve the crime of murder.
That is the exact legal philosophy at play. But the notes include a very sharp critique of the Casals decision.
Oh, really? They disagree?
They suggest the court may have completely misapplied the doctrine.
Why? Backwards money is harmless.
Because under Philippine law, an impossible crime typically requires that the act performed would be an offense against persons or property. Think murder, assault, theft. But as we have discussed for the past hour, forgery and falsification are not strictly crimes against persons or property.
Right. They're crimes against public interest. They're crimes against the state itself.
Exactly. The notes argue that applying the impossible crime doctrine to forgery is legally flawed, because the true crime of forgery is the act of mocking the state's authority and attacking the public trust.
Oh, I see.
Even if you do a terrible, comical job of faking a treasury note, you still engaged in the act of mocking the state's sovereignty. The notes argue that Casals needs serious re-examination unless the law is specifically amended.
That is a brilliant piece of legal pedantry. I can totally picture the prosecutor arguing, Your Honor, their sheer stupidity does not negate the fact that they attack the macroeconomic stability of the Republic.
It is a debate that strips away the paper and ink and forces us to look at the deep philosophical roots of why these laws exist in the first place.
Which brings us perfectly to the end of our incredibly deep dive today.
It's been a journey.
A monumental journey through the architecture of deception. Just to recap the immense ground we've covered today.
Let's do it.
We started with the literal, physical acts of forgery in Article 169, whether you are building the illusion completely from scratch or erasing the truth.
Method 1 and 2.
Then we escalated into the devastating, life-altering penalties of Article 166, exploring exactly why the state protects its bearer instruments and currency with the threat of millions of pesos in fines and decades in prison.
Defending the fiat hallucination.
Right. Then we navigated the complex, messy realities of Article 167, where targeted attacks on order instruments, the poisoned coffee, are treated differently than attacks on the general economy.
The well.
And finally, we looked at Article 168, the psychological minefield of illegal possession, where your physical reaction, tearing up a bill or lying to the police about a gun, can literally seal your fate.
The big takeaway here for everyone listening is to just recognize the invisible architecture all around you.
The trust web.
Yes. The next time you hand over a crisp bill at a store, or the next time you sign your name on the back of a check to endorse it, just realize what you are actually doing.
You are not just making a payment.
No, you are actively participating in a vast, incredibly fragile, highly regulated web of trust. And that trust is fiercely protected by complex statutes and over a century of fascinating, human-driven court rulings.
It really does make you look at the paper in your wallet completely differently. But I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to really chew on as you go about your day.
Okay, lay it out.
Something that builds on literally everything we've unpacked today.
Let's hear it.
Think about the foundation of every single law, every case, and every ruling we discussed. It is entirely based on the physical, tangible nature of documents.
Very true.
We talked about ink, paper blends, rubber stamps, dry seals, and watermarks. We analyzed the physical act of snatching a bill from someone's hands and tearing it to pieces.
Yeah.
We laughed about people printing images backwards on coupon bonds.
The entire legal framework is anchored deeply to the physical artifacts of value.
Exactly. But look at the trajectory of our financial system right now. We are moving at breakneck speed into a world of entirely digital transactions.
Wire transfers, digital banking apps.
And most importantly, the massive rise of decentralized digital assets like cryptocurrency. We are entering a reality where a document is no longer a piece of paper, but a string of cryptographic code sitting on a distributed blockchain.
The physical artifact is just vanishing entirely.
It is. Possession no longer means holding a 20 peso bill in your pocket. It means holding a private key on a thumb drive or memorizing a seed phrase.
Wow.
So how on earth is the penal code going to adapt? How will future Supreme Courts redefine giving the appearance of truth when there is no physical paper to look at?
That's a huge question.
How do you prove the alteration of an immutable digital ledger? What does illegal possession look like when the asset only exists in the cloud scattered across thousands of servers globally?
The laws of forgery, Articles 166 through 159, were meticulously written for a world defined by paper and ink.
So the ultimate question is, will these laws and the philosophies behind them survive the end of paper?
That is the technological frontier of criminal law right there. And honestly, it is going to require an entirely new generation of legal minds to figure it out.
Something fascinating to ponder next time you tap your phone to pay. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Welcome to the debate. So I want you to imagine a single counterfeit banknote sliding across the counter of a local grocery store. Just a fake 20 peso bill, let's say.
Right. Happens all the time.
Exactly. But here's the thing. If the person passing that fake bill is caught, they could face, literally decades in a maximum security prison. And you have to ask yourself why. When you really think about it, who is the victim here?
Well, most people would say the cashier.
Right, that's the instinct. Is the government simply trying to protect a hardworking cashier from losing 20 bucks? Or, and this is what we're going to dig into today, is the government terrified because that single localized piece of fake paper is actually like a microscopic crack in the foundation of the entire national economy?
Yeah, it's a massive escalation of harm.
It really is. Today, we are looking at the strict and honestly incredibly complex framework of forgery and falsification of financial instruments. Specifically, we're examining Articles 166 through 169 of the Philippine Revised Penal Code.
Which is a fascinating section of the law.
It is, because we are addressing a really profound question of legal philosophy here. When the law brings its heaviest hammer down on forgery, what is it primarily protecting? Is the penal code fundamentally designed to protect state sovereignty and the macro-systemic trust in currency? Or is it fundamentally targeting the individual's malicious intent to deceive and defraud others in everyday commerce?
And that is the crux of it.
Right, so my position, grounded in the text itself, is that the law's rigid hierarchy of penalties and its really aggressive shifting of the burden of proof reflect a primary defense of the sovereign state's financial integrity, basically above all else.
And my position is that the statute's highly specific requirements around, an offender's knowledge, their exact conduct, and the actual physical appearance of the forged documents, all of that proves that the law is ultimately and intimately concerned with individual deceptive intent.
Okay, let's start by looking at why the state sovereignty framework is, really the only way to make sense of the sheer brutality of these statutes. Because forgery of currency isn't treated as a simple crime against property, it's just not.
It's treated much more severely.
Exactly. It is treated as an existential threat to the state itself. You can see this undeniably in how Article 166 establishes a rigid hierarchy of penalties. The law doesn't just say forgery is bad, it actually weighs the political gravity of the specific piece of paper being forged.
Right, it looks at the origin.
Yeah. If someone forges an obligation or security of the Philippines, like a treasury note or a national bank note, the law triggers the absolute highest penalty in this section. We are talking reclusion temporal in its minimum period.
Which is intense.
It's massive. That means a person is looking at well over a decade behind bars, combined with a staggering fine of up to 2 million pesos. The state is bringing the full, crushing force of its punitive power to bear on this specific act.
It is a massive penalty, absolutely. But
well, wait, just look at what happens when the document forged is a circulating note issued by a foreign bank. The penalty drops precipitously. It drops to prison mayor in its minimum period, and the fine is capped at 400,000 pesos.
Right?
So let's think about the why here. If the law were primarily concerned with the abstract concept of deception, or just protecting an individual merchant from being defrauded, the origin of the note wouldn't matter so much.
You mean a fake is a fake to the cashier?
Precisely. From a purely commercial standpoint, a merchant is equally harmed whether they are handed a fake Philippine peso or a fake foreign note of equivalent value. Their cash register is still short. But the law aggressively protects the sovereign's own paper because fiat currency, the money we use every day, only works through collective psychological trust.
A shared hallucination, basically.
Shared hallucination backed by the government. The integrity of that paper is synonymous with the authority of the state itself. If you undermine the paper, you undermine the state.
I come at it from a different way. You were focusing on the gravity of the punishment, which certainly points to state interests. But if we look closely at the mechanics of the law, how the law actually operates on the ground, particularly in Articles 168 and 169, the entire architecture of the crime collapses without the presence of an individual's intent to deceive.
How so? If the state is protecting its currency, isn't the mere existence of the fake currency enough to trigger the law?
Exactly the point. If this were purely about protecting the state's sovereign paper, the mere existence of a forged note in someone's pocket would be enough to trigger the state's immune response. But it isn't.
Well, possession is covered.
It is, but under Article 168, mere possession of a forged note is not a crime by itself. The statute explicitly requires that possession must be coupled with the intent to use that false instrument.
Right, the intent.
Furthermore, look at how Article 169 defines the very commission of forgery. It requires that the offender actually gives the instrument the, quote, appearance of a true, genuine document. It specifies erasing, substituting, or altering figures and words. The law demands a viable illusion. It requires an actor actively attempting to trick the mind of another human being.
So you're saying the artistry matters? the craftsmanship.
The artistry is everything. If the law were solely a macro-level defense of state authority, the physical mechanics of deception wouldn't be the linchpin of the crime. The unauthorized reproduction of the state symbol would be enough. If I draw the state seal on a napkin, that's an unauthorized reproduction, right?
Sure, technically.
But the law is targeting the malice of the individual fraudster, the attempt to alter reality for someone else. It's not just policing pieces of paper, it's policing the human act of trickery.
But let's look at the canvas they are using for that trickery, because the type of instrument completely changes how the state responds, which again highlights the hierarchy of harm I was talking about. The law draws a massive line between bearer instruments under Article 167 and instruments payable to order under Article 167.
That's a fair distinction to explore, because the penalties do shift there.
It's more than just a distinction, honestly. It's a completely different philosophy of risk. A bearer instrument, by its very definition, is negotiated by mere delivery. Whoever holds it owns it. It circulates freely, exactly like cash.
Right.
A non-bearer instrument, on the other hand, requires an endorsement. It has a specific name attached to it. Now look at the penalties. Forging a non-bearer instrument under Article 167 drops the penalty dramatically down to prison correctionnelle and a fine of up to 1.2 million pesos.
Which is still high but significantly lower.
It is a steep cliff from the reclusion temporal and the 2 million peso fine we see for bearer instruments of the Philippines. Why does the law care so much whether a name needs to be signed on the back? Because the state prioritizes systemic threats.
So you're arguing the velocity of the instrument is the threat? The speed at which it moves?
Exactly. A bearer instrument can change hands 100 times in a single week. It invisibly contaminates the economic bloodstream. Every time it changes hands, the foundational trust in the state's currency is eroded a little bit more. An instrument payable to order is localized. It involves specific individuals endorsing it to other specific individuals. It leaves a paper trail. The state is explicitly saying here that a systemic, untraceable threat to public trust is fundamentally worse than an individual, localized commercial dispute.
I certainly agree that bearer instruments are punished more severely because of their velocity in circulation. A fake bill moving silently through a city is dangerous. I won't argue that.
Right.
But you cannot ignore the specific human element required to actually prosecute the circulation of these instruments. Let's look at the act of uttering, which is the legal term for passing off these fakes.
Okay, the deployment of the fake into the wild.
Right, the deployment. Under both Article 166 and Article 167. Uttering these instruments requires connivance with the forgers or importers. That is a really fascinating word choice by the legislature, connivance.
It implies conspiracy.
It requires a network of intentional actors working together with a shared guilty mind. The law doesn't just sweep up anyone who happens to pass a bad bill. It specifically targets the conspiratorial intent to defraud. It demands proof that you are in on the scheme.
So you need to know the origin.
Exactly. The crime, therefore, is deeply rooted in the relationships and agreements between malicious actors, not just the abstract economic velocity of the paper.
Well, I think you are leaning a bit too heavily on the connivance requirement to prove a necessity for this broad network of interpersonal deception. Let's look at the edge cases in the jurisprudence, specifically the precedent set in People versus Orqueza. What happens when the utterer is also the forger?
Well, in that scenario, they are the source. There's no one to connive with.
Precisely. And the court makes it explicitly clear that in such cases, connivance is not required. The liability rests entirely on the forgery itself.
Because the forgery is the initial act.
Think of it this way. It's like an arsonist. The connivance requirement is like saying we need to prove a conspiracy to distribute gasoline. But if the person who lit the match is the exact same person holding the gas can, you don't need a network.
Fair point.
The act of creating the systemic threat, the actual forgery, is the core offense. The uttering is just the deployment of that threat. The state's primary terror is the creation of unauthorized fiat money, not necessarily the interpersonal conspiracy to hand it to a cashier.
But wait, if the state only cares about the creation of the systemic threat, why does it care so much about what's happening inside a single person's head when they are just holding a piece of paper?
What do you mean?
The deployment, the uttering, or the intent to use is exactly where the law's true focus lies. And if we look at Article 168, things get very interesting regarding human behavior.
Because Article 168 deals with mere possession?
Exactly. Article 168 dictates that the offender must know the instrument is forged and that intent to use is what actually consummates the crime. Now, how does the state prove this internal, invisible knowledge? It can't read minds.
No, it relies on circumstances.
It has to rely on behavioral analysis. And the jurisprudence here is incredible because it shows courts acting almost like psychologists.
You're referring to cases where the accused tries to hide the money, right?
More than just hiding it. Let's dive into People versus Valcani. I mean, imagine the sheer desperation of this scenario. The accused is carrying a package of counterfeit bills. The police stop him and start searching him.
A routine stop.
Right. And he knows exactly what is in that package, and he knows the weight of the law. So what does he do? He first denies having them. Then he actively tries to mislead the police officers by claiming his only crime is carrying an unlicensed revolver.
He'd literally rather take a gun charge?
He tries to admit to a serious weapons charge just to divert their attention from the counterfeit bills. He was willing to be branded a criminal, just not that kind of criminal. The courts rely on these physical manifestations of guilt.
Because it shows awareness.
Exactly. The desperate misdirection in Vacani or in People versus Quinto, where a man snatched a fake 20 peso bill and tore it to shreds the second someone started looking at it too closely. Why does the jurisprudence highlight these actions? Because it proves the law is actively policing the human conscience, the guilty mind. It is interrogating human intent. It needs to see that the person knew they were deceiving.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. You're arguing that the law deeply respects and interrogates the presumption of innocence regarding intent. You're saying it patiently watches a person's behavior to deduce their internal morality.
Right. That's what the case law shows.
But the actual application of the law regarding possession shows something entirely different, something actually quite terrifying from a civil liberties standpoint.
Terrifying in what way?
Yes, mere possession isn't a crime on its face. But how does the law actually treat someone caught holding a fake bill? The jurisprudence, specifically cases like People versus De La Roca and People versus Sane, establishes a very harsh reality. The burden of explaining satisfactorily the innocent possession of forged bills falls squarely on the accused.
Right, it shifts the burden.
Completely. Think about the gravity of that in the criminal justice system. In almost any other criminal framework, the state must prove your malicious intent from scratch. You are innocent until proven guilty.
Generally, yes.
But here, the mere possession of a piece of fake sovereign paper shifts the burden entirely. You are presumed to be a threat to the financial system until you can convince a court otherwise. Furthermore, if a person is in possession of a falsified instrument and makes use of it, as we see in People versus San Diego, they are legally presumed to be the material author of the falsification itself.
Assuming they can't explain where they got it, yes.
Right, but the point is the government assumes you are the forger until you prove you aren't. Why would the law do this? The law is so terrified of the systemic risk of forged currency that it actively compromises standard procedural protections. It forces the individual to prove they aren't a threat to the macro system. That is the absolute hallmark of a law defending state sovereignty in a state of panic, not one patiently analyzing individual commercial morality.
It shifts the burden, yes, which is a heavy hand by the state. I can see that. But it still allows the individual the opportunity to explain themselves, which means the law hasn't entirely abandoned the concept of individual culpability. As the material notes in People versus Padilla, even if someone has a forged note, if they throw it away instead of carrying out the intention to use it, the law does not close the door on repentance.
Repentance.
Yes. That concept, repentance, is deeply tied to individual morality and intent. The state is saying, we caught you with a threat, but because you chose not to deploy the trick, we won't punish you. That's a micro-level judgment.
Okay, but
let me bring up the ultimate proof of my perspective. Let's build on this tension between possessing a fake and the actual mechanics of using it. What happens when the forgery is so catastrophically bad that it cannot possibly deceive anyone?
the impossible crime.
Exactly. We have to look at People versus Casals. In this case, the printed matters of a treasury note were inversely reproduced on a coupon bond. It was an absolutely absurd forgery.
Like totally amateurous.
Right. It was inherently impossible for anyone with functioning eyes to accept these as genuine money. The court ruled this an impossible crime. Why? Because the physical deception completely failed. It failed the foundational requirement of Article 169, which demands giving the instrument the appearance of a true, genuine document.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. You're saying that if a forgery is so terribly made that no one would ever believe it, the law essentially says no harm, no foul because the psychological trick never had a chance of happening?
Exactly. If this were purely about state authority, if the state were simply punishing the unauthorized reproduction of its symbols to protect its sovereignty, then the quality of the reproduction wouldn't matter. The insult to the sovereign would be the same.
The act of defiance is there regardless.
Right, the act of defiance is there, but the court said no, because it couldn't deceive a human mind, because it lacked the physical capacity to defraud an individual in commerce. It was an impossible crime. The illusion matters more than the symbol.
I am so glad you brought up the Casals case because I think it is the perfect trap for your argument.
A trap? Really?
Yes, because the source material contains a massive, explicit caveat to that exact ruling. A caveat that perfectly cements my thesis. The text explicitly notes that the Casals decision finding an impossible crime needs re-examination, unless the law is amended, and it gives a highly specific jurisprudential reason why.
Which is?
It states that an essential element of an impossible crime in Philippine law is that the act must be a crime against persons or property.
Okay.
But, and this is the absolute crux of our entire debate, the text unequivocally declares that forgery or falsification is not a crime against persons or property. Let that sink in. The jurisprudence itself, in critiquing the Casals decision, establishes that forgery is fundamentally severed from the concept of interpersonal theft or property damage.
Well, that is a very specific reading of how the impossible crime statute intersects with forgery.
But it's foundational. If forgery is explicitly not a crime against persons, and it is explicitly not a crime against property, what is left? It is definitively a crime against the state. It is a crime against public trust. The critique of Casals exposes the flaw in your framework. You simply cannot apply the logic of property crimes and interpersonal deception to an offense that is structurally designed, from the ground up, to protect the sovereign's monopoly on currency.
That is a highly technical critique of Casals, yes, but it doesn't erase the actual plain text of Article 169 itself. The Penal Code still absolutely requires the offender to alter the document to give it the appearance of a genuine one. Let's look at People versus Galano.
Oh, the demonetized bill case?
Yes. In that case, the forgery involved writing the word victory on the back of a 1 peso bill that had already been withdrawn from circulation. It was demonetized money. Or look at People versus Arquiza again, where fake checks were given the appearance of true documents by engraving bold types and causing a rubber stamp and dry seal to be made.
They went to great lengths.
They did. The law is undeniably obsessed with the physical craftsmanship of the deception. The state might claim in its high-minded jurisprudence that it is protecting its sovereignty, but the mechanism it uses to define the crime on a daily basis is entirely focused on the cognitive act of trickery. If it's not a crime against a person's property, as you say, it is at least a crime against a person's perception. The state is punishing the attempt to distort reality for financial gain.
But that distortion of reality is only punished severely when it threatens the macroeconomic reality. Think about it. If I forge a letter of recommendation for a job, or if I forge a receipt for a toaster, I'm distorting reality. I am deceiving a human mind.
True.
But I don't face reclusion temporale and a 2 million peso fine. I only face that apocalyptic level of punishment when I forge the obligations of the Philippines. We are looking at a legal framework built primarily to defend a sovereign currency system from systemic contamination. From the staggering fines that dwarf standard fraud penalties, to the explicit shifting of the burden of proof onto anyone merely holding these fakes, to the definitive doctrinal statement that this is not a crime against property.
You see it as a fortress.
Exactly. The state views counterfeiters not as mere thieves tricking cashiers, but as economic insurgents attacking the state. The strictness of Articles 166 through 169 is a defensive wall around the concept of fiat currency itself.
And yet, that massive defensive wall has specific human-shaped gates built right into it. Despite the systemic protections you've outlined, the legislature specifically carved out requirements for connivance among utterers. It specifically demanded an intent to use rather than criminalizing pure possession. It specifically required the physical alteration to create the appearance of a true, genuine document.
They're elements of the crime, yes.
The law recognizes that a systemic threat doesn't just manifest out of thin air. It manifests through the calculated, malicious choices of individuals. The law remains fundamentally concerned with policing that individual cognitive act of deception. The severity of the penalty doesn't change the intimate human nature of the act being punished.
I think this highlights exactly why this area of jurisprudence is so incredibly nuanced and frankly so fascinating. We both acknowledge that you really cannot fully understand Articles 166 through 169 without viewing them through both of these lenses simultaneously. The macro-systemic framework explains the sheer gravity, the weight of the penalties, and the state's panic over the integrity of its currency.
Right. And the micro-intentional framework explains the complex behavioral thresholds, the repentance, the deceptive intent, the physical craftsmanship that are actually required to secure a conviction in a courtroom. The tension between the state's desperate need to protect its economic lifeblood and the legal necessity to prove individual criminal intent makes every single forgery case a complex study in human behavior.
There is clearly so much more to explore regarding how courts interpret these exact limits in practice, especially when the lines between an individual fraudster and a systemic threat begin to blur. We will leave it to the listener to decide which philosophy truly anchors the law. As you think about it, remember that single counterfeit bill sliding across the grocery store counter. Is the law bringing its hammer down because the cashier is being tricked, or is it bringing the hammer down because the entire economy is slowly being poisoned? Thank you for listening.